Welcome back. Well, this week, economic data, including PMI survey data, is set to dominate the spotlight, with investors keenly awaiting insights into global economic trends and business confidence amidst ongoing trade tensions and escalating Middle East conflict. Zaye Capital Markets' Chief Investment Officer Naeem Aslam joins us for a preview of the economic week ahead. Thank you so much for your time, Naeem. Let's actually start with what is dominating the markets, creating some heat there, and of course it's geopolitical developments. What's your reading of the market sentiment on the US entering the conflict between Iran and Israel?
Yes, thanks for having me as always. Look, on one hand, when you look at the US stock indices, and especially as of yesterday, when the event happened early in the morning or in London time, we were looking at the US market, we were looking at the Middle Eastern market, we were looking at the crypto market, and we were looking at the futures market in order to find out how this particular event is going to influence the risk sentiment going into Monday. So the indications that we were looking at and the numbers that we were looking at were telling us that investors are either, one, sleepwalking into a black swan event, or number two, everyone is just too much optimistic and then they think that everything is very much contained. Every tweet, like I cannot get away from my phone, from Twitter, from all the information that the President Donald Trump is very much tweeting and that we are getting from all different sources in the Middle East, because every tweet is changing the narrative in the market. As of now, Qatar's airspace is closed because Iran has made its position clear that in the next coming hours, it is going to attack US bases. We don't know where that attack will happen, but obviously one of the biggest military base the United States has is in Qatar. Now, from investments perspective, it is what does that really mean? Because as of yesterday, we were all talking about, okay, the attack has happened, Iran will go and Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz. And that means that international trade is going to come under immense pressure, especially Europe, where we are based. Because if none of the energy supply is going to pass from Strait of Hormuz, that means oil and energy, after that sanctions on Russia, where Europe was getting its LNG and the rest of oil, will be completely cut off. Then it will only rely on the United States. That means higher inflationary pressure over here in Europe, much, much more further strain. And of course, in China, all the international trades in terms of energy is passing through that Strait of Hormuz. And if that is closed, then it is different. But now, as of just 10 minutes ago, the situation has completely changed, because now we are looking at Qatar closing its airspace. A major Middle Eastern country could be dragged in this particular war, because obviously, if any attack happens, Qatar is going to consider attack against its sovereignty as well. The violation of those particular boundaries. So this is an ever-changing, evolving situation where investors need to stay alert at all times.
Just looking at specifically the oil market, because I would think that in this situation, it would have risen above $80 per barrel because of the geographical escalation, particularly what we could get this week. What is the oil market actually pricing in?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my earlier comment where I was alluding to two major points.
Yes.
One is sleepwalking into a black swan event, because investors are not understanding properly the implications of what this particular mean, because or there's just too much optimism that okay, this particular war will be contained, there'll be no regional impact apart from what has happened, and the regime change will happen, or it may not happen. But even the president of chaos, like Donald Trump over here, every tweet changes the landscape. First, he says he doesn't want the regime change. Now he has tweeted that he knows where the so-called the supreme leader is hiding, and they will, I don't know what does that really mean. Investors like whether because the White House press secretary is saying that a regime change is very much going to happen. President said something else, but now today his stance is different. So if there's a regime change,
Yeah.
does that mean wider conflict? What does a wider conflict mean in terms of the mid to short term for prices? One thing is for certain, public, an ordinary citizen living in Europe, living across the world, has faced higher inflation.
Yeah.
Your disposable income has already shrunk.
Yeah.
The value of money in your pocket has less purchasing power. With any external shocks, you're going to be pushed further towards the edge where we are looking at a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Well, as we're talking about the value of money and purchasing power, we do have some economic data coming out of the U.S. this week. We have another revision of the U.S.'s Q1 GDP that's coming out on Thursday. And then we have the PCE, of course, the Fed's preferred measure of inflation for May, coming out on Friday. What kind of tone are you expecting from these data points on the health of the U.S. economy?
Any adverse reading from these particular data points is only going to create more panic among smart money players. Because for them, okay, the conditions were getting worse. Now we are looking at something which is going to become even more worse. If you look at the recent comments from the Federal Reserve, inflation remains a major cornerstone for it in his meeting. He is indicating that inflation is still a major threat because of the trade war tariffs. That it was in relation to trade war tariff. Now we're looking at an actual war, a war in the Middle East, a war which is going to impact an ingredient which sits at the heart of everything when it comes to inflation. And that is your oil prices, your energy prices. So going into this one, GDP revisions or anything to do with any other economic point, any reading which fails to impress investors in terms of the forecast is only going to create an adversary environment. And if you still do not see the market in terms of the indices shifting more than 1,500 points with respect to Dow Jones Industrial Average, know that this is sleepwalking into a black swan event.
And of course, we will be getting some comments from Fed officials, including Fed Chair Jerome Powell when he testifies to the House Financial Service Committee, and we will be sifting through those comments. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights there, Naeem, on what's happening and what you expect in the week ahead. That was Zaye Capital Markets' Chief Investment Officer, Naeem Aslam, with the Economic Week Ahead.